The town of Blackthorn was a place where secrets clung to the air like damp moss to the trees. Nestled in a valley cradled by jagged mountains, it was a town that seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something to break its eternal stillness. On the morning of October 12, 2015, that stillness was shattered when 16-year-old Lila Monroe vanished on her way to Blackthorn High. She left her house at 7:15 a.m., her red corduroy jacket slung over one shoulder, her backpack heavy with books and dreams. She never made it to school. Lila was the kind of girl who seemed to carry light in her bones. Her laughter could cut through the fog that often blanketed the town, and her eyes, green as the pines that ringed Blackthorn, held a curiosity that made people feel seen. She was a poet, a dreamer, always scribbling in her notebook, weaving words into worlds that felt more real than the gray streets of her hometown. Her mother, Ellen, said she was born with an old soul, one that seemed to know things she shouldn't. Her father, Tom, called her his compass, always pointing towards something brighter. But that morning the compass broke. The police searched for weeks. They combed the forests, dragged the river, interviewed classmates, neighbors, and even the reclusive old woman who lived at the edge of town, rumored to be a witch. Nothing. No trace of Lila, no sign of struggle, no witnesses. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. The only clue was a single page torn from her notebook, found caught in a bramble bush half a mile from her usual path to school. The page held a poem, unfinished. Its last line, a haunting fragment. "The shadow calls, and I follow where the light cannot go." Ellen and Tom clung to that poem like a lifeline, parsing its words for meaning, for hope. The town rallied at first. Vigils, flyers, search parties. But as weeks turned to months, the fervor faded. Blackthorn settled back into its quiet unease, and Lila became a ghost, her name whispered in hushed tones, her face fading from the posters that yellowed on telephone poles. 10 years later, on a crisp October morning in 2025, the past clawed its way back to the surface. A hiker, a stranger passing through, stumbled upon a red corduroy jacket in the heart of Blackthorn Forest. It was half buried under leaves, its fabric frayed but unmistakable. Embroidered on the inner lining was a name, Lila Monroe. The discovery sent shockwaves through the town. The police reopened the case, but the jacket offered no new answers, only questions. How had it survived a decade in the elements, barely weathered? Why was it found now, in a part of the forest searched countless times? And most chillingly, what did it mean that the jacket was empty, as if Lila had slipped out of it and into some other world? Ellen Monroe stood in her kitchen, staring at the jacket now sealed in an evidence bag on her table. The police had brought it to her, a formality before it was sent for forensic analysis. She hadn't touched it, couldn't bear to, but her fingers twitched with the urge to rip open the plastic and press the fabric to her face, to search for some trace of her daughter's scent. Instead, she poured herself a third cup of coffee, her hands trembling. The house was too quiet now, had been for years. Tom had left 5 years after Lila's disappearance, unable to live in a home that felt like a tomb. Ellen stayed, tethered to Blackthorn by a stubborn hope that Lila might one day walk through the door. The jacket's reappearance wasn't just a mystery, it was a wound reopened. Ellen's nights were haunted by dreams of Lila, her voice calling from the forest, her face half hidden in shadow. In those dreams, Lila was always reaching out, her fingers brushing Ellen's before dissolving into mist. The dreams felt too real, too vivid, and Ellen began to wonder if they were dreams at all. She hadn't told anyone, not the police, not her therapist, about the whispers she'd started hearing at night, faint and fleeting, like leaves rustling in a windless room. "Mom, I'm still here," the voice would say, and Ellen would wake heart-pounding, searching the darkness for her daughter. Across town, Lila's best friend, Sarah Wells, was grappling with her own ghosts. Now 26, Sarah was a teacher at Blackthorn High, her life a careful reconstruction after the chaos of Lila's disappearance. She'd been the last person to see Lila that morning, waving to her from across the street as Lila cut through the park toward school. Sarah had replayed that moment 1,000 times, searching for something she'd missed, a stranger in the background, a flicker of fear in Lila's eyes. Nothing. Just Lila's red jacket, catching the morning light as she disappeared around a bend. When Sarah heard about the jacket, she felt a jolt, as if the past had reached out and grabbed her by the throat. She drove to the forest, to the spot where the jacket had been found, though the police had already cordoned it off. The trees loomed tall and silent, their branches forming a canopy that seemed to swallow the sky. Sarah didn't believe in the town's old stories, tales of spirits in the woods, of a forest that took what it wanted, but standing there she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. She remembered Lila's obsession with the forest, how she'd talk about its pulse, as if it were alive. Sarah had laughed it off then, but now she wondered. The town buzzed with theories. Some said Lila had run away, that the jacket was a sign she was still out there, living a new life. Others whispered darker things, that the forest itself had claimed her, that Blackthorn was cursed. The old woman at the town's edge, Mara, became the subject of renewed gossip. She'd always been an outcast, her cabin filled with strange symbols and herbs, her eyes sharp with knowing. Lila had been fascinated by her, sneaking off to ask questions about the old ways, about the forest's secrets. Ellen had forbidden it, but Lila was never one to listen. As the days passed, Ellen began to notice things. A flicker of movement in the backyard at dusk. The faint smell of pine and rain in Lila's old room, though the windows were sealed. And the poem, Lila's poem, kept surfacing in her mind, its words looping like a mantra. Night's shadow calls, and I follow where the light cannot go. Ellen didn't know what it meant, but she felt it pulling her, urging her toward the forest. She wasn't sure if it was grief, madness, or something else entirely, but she knew one thing. The jacket wasn't just a clue. It was a message. The forest was a living thing. Ellen was sure of it now. She stood at its edge, where the asphalt of Blackthorn's main road gave way to a dirt path swallowed by towering pines. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and something sharper, like the tang of ozone before a storm. The red corduroy jacket, now locked away in a police evidence locker, had been found just a mile from here, in a part of the forest that felt older, wilder than the rest. Ellen hadn't planned to come today, but the pull was undeniable, a tug in her chest, like a thread unraveling from her heart, leading her into the trees. She hadn't slept properly since the jacket resurfaced. The whispers in her dreams had grown louder, more insistent, Lila's voice threading through them like a melody she couldn't quite grasp. "Mom, I'm still here," the words echoed as she stepped onto the path, her boots sinking into the soft earth. The forest seemed to watch her, its silence not empty but expectant, as if it knew why she'd come. Ellen's breath caught in her throat, her fingers tightening around the flashlight in her coat pocket, though it was barely noon and the sun filtered through the canopy in weak, dappled patches. She hadn't told anyone she was coming here. Not Sarah, who'd been calling daily, her voice tight with worry. Not the police, who dismissed her questions about the jacket's condition with vague promises of further analysis. Ellen didn't trust their competence anymore. They'd failed Lila once, and she wouldn't let them fail her again. She carried a folded copy of Lila's poem in her pocket, the one found in the bramble bush 10 years ago. She'd memorized it, but touching the paper felt like touching Lila, her looping handwriting, her quiet defiance captured in ink. The path wound deeper, the trees closing in until the sky was a mere sliver above. Ellen's heart thudded, not from exertion but from a growing sense of being unseen. She stopped, her gaze snagging on a gnarled oak, its bark carved with faint spiraling patterns that didn't look natural. They reminded her of the doodles Lila used to sketch in the margins of her notebooks, swirls and loops, like a language only she understood. Ellen reached out, her fingers hovering over the carvings, but a sudden rustle in the underbrush made her freeze. "Who's there?" she called, her voice sharper than she intended. The forest swallowed the sound, giving nothing back. She waited, her pulse loud in her ears, but there was only silence. Then, faintly, a scent, pine and rain, the same as in Lila's room. Ellen's knees buckled and she steadied herself against the oak, her fingers brushing the carvings. They were warm, impossibly so, as if the tree were alive in a way that went beyond biology. She pressed on, the path narrowing until it was barely a suggestion underfoot. The forest seemed to shift around her, branches swaying without wind, shadows pooling where they shouldn't. She was no stranger to these woods. She'd searched them tirelessly after Lila vanished. But today they felt different, like a house rearranged in the dark. The air grew colder, and her flashlight flickered when she switched it on, its beam weak against the deepening gloom. After what felt like hours but was likely less, Ellen reached a clearing she didn't recognize. It was small, ringed by trees so dense they formed a near-perfect circle. In the center stood a single stone, flat and smooth, like an altar. The ground around it was bare, no grass or weeds, just dark, loamy earth that seemed to drink in the light. Ellen's breath hitched. This wasn't on any map, not even the ones the search parties had used. She stepped forward, her boots leaving no imprint on the soil, and that's when she saw it, a flash of red in the underbrush, just beyond the clearing. Her heart lurched. She stumbled toward it, half expecting another jacket, but it was only a scrap of fabric, faded and caught on a thorn. Not Lila's, but close enough to make her chest ache. She knelt, her fingers trembling as she freed the cloth. It was soft, almost silken, and it carried that same scent, pine and rain. She tucked it into her pocket, next to the poem, and stood, her eyes scanning the clearing. That's when she heard it, a low, melodic hum, like a voice just out of reach. Ellen, de Kanen. She spun, her flashlight dropping to the ground. The voice was real, not a dream, and it came from the trees. Not Lila's voice, but older, weathered like leaves scraping stone. "Who's there?" she demanded again, her voice cracking. The hum stopped, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then a figure stepped into the clearing. Mara, the old woman from the edge of town. Mara's eyes were sharp, glinting like polished obsidian, her white hair loose and tangled with bits of twig and leaf. She wore a long patched coat that seemed to blend with the forest itself. "You shouldn't be here alone," Mara said, her voice low but carrying an authority that made Ellen's skin prickle. "This place doesn't take kindly to uninvited guests." Ellen straightened, clutching the poem in her pocket like a talisman. "I'm looking for my daughter," she said, her voice steadier now. "The jacket. They found it here. You know something, don't you?" Mara's lips curved, not quite a smile. "The forest keeps its own counsel, Ellen Monroe. It gives back what it chooses when it chooses. That jacket wasn't lost. It was returned here." She stepped closer, her gaze flicking to the stone in the clearing. Lila knew this place. She came here more than once, asked questions she wasn't ready for. Ellen's throat tightened. "What questions? What did she want from you?" Mara tilted her head as if listening to something Ellen couldn't hear. She wanted to know the forest's heart, its pulse. She felt it, same as you do now, but she went too far, crossed a line most don't come back from. "Stop talking in riddles," Ellen snapped, her grief boiling into anger. "If you know where she is, tell me." Mara's eyes softened, but only slightly. "I don't know where she is, child, but I know this forest isn't just trees and dirt. It's a threshold, a place where the world thins. Lila felt it calling her, and now it's calling you." Ellen's breath caught. The word thresholding echoed in her mind, familiar but out of reach. She remembered Lila's notebook, the one she hadn't dared open yet, tucked away in a box under her bed. Had Lila written that word? Had she known what it meant? "Go home, Ellen," Mara said, turning back toward the trees. "But if you come back, bring something of hers, something that holds her light. The forest will ask for it." Before Ellen could respond, Mara vanished into the shadows, as if the forest had swallowed her whole. The clearing was silent again, but the hum lingered in Ellen's ears, and the scent of pine and rain clung to her skin. She looked at the stone, its surface gleaming faintly, and felt a pull stronger than ever. She didn't know what Mara meant, but she knew one thing. She wasn't leaving this forest until she found her daughter. Ellen drove home from the forest with her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. The scrap of red fabric sat on the passenger seat, a silent accusation, its faint scent of pine and rain filling the car like an unwanted passenger. Mara's words echoed in her mind. Threshold, pulse, on something that holds her lightning, each one a needle pricking at the fragile shell of her composure. The old woman's cryptic warning should have angered her, but instead, they stirred something deeper. A flicker of recognition, as if some part of her already knew the forest's secrets. The Monroe house was a husk of its former self, its once warm walls now cold and peeling. Ellen stepped inside, the silence pressing against her like a physical weight. She hadn't changed much since Lila's disappearance. Same faded couch, same chipped coffee mugs, same photos on the mantel. Lila's face smiled from a dozen frames. Lila at her 10th birthday, blowing out candles. Lila on her first day of high school, her red jacket slung carelessly over one shoulder. Lila with Sarah, arms linked, laughing under a summer sky. Ellen avoided looking at them, but tonight she couldn't escape. She needed answers, and they weren't in the forest. Not yet. She climbed the stairs to Lila's room, her footsteps heavy on the creaking wood. The door was ajar, as it always was, a habit born of hope that Lila might somehow return. The room was untouched, a shrine frozen in time, posters of indie bands pinned to the walls, a desk cluttered with pens, and half-finished poems, a bed with a quilt Ellen had sewn when Lila was born. The air felt charged, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Ellen knelt by the bed and pulled out a wooden box she hadn't touched in years. Inside were Lila's things, notebooks, trinkets, a silver bracelet with a tiny star charm. She hadn't been able to face them before, but Mara's words had shifted something in her. I bring something of hers. Gadniun. Nanods. She opened the first notebook, its pages yellowed but intact. Lila's handwriting spilled across them, a mix of poetry and sketches, words weaving through drawings of spirals, trees, and strange angular symbols that made Ellen's eyes ache to look at. One page caught her attention, a sketch of the forest clearing she'd seen today, the flat stone at its center rendered in meticulous detail. Beneath it, Lila had written a single word, white thresholding. Ellen's breath hitched. It was the same word Mara had used, the same one that had been tugging at her memory. She turned the page and found a poem, its lines jagged and urgent. The forest hums, a song without sound, calling me to where the roots are bound. The light phrase, the shadow weaves. A door in the earth where the lost still breathe. Ellen's hands trembled as she read. The words felt alive, pulsing under her fingertips. She remembered Lila's obsession with the forest, how she'd come home with leaves in her hair, her eyes bright with secrets. Ellen had thought it was just teenage rebellion, a phase. But now, staring at the notebook, she wondered how much she'd missed. Had Lila been chasing something real, something dangerous? She flipped through more pages, finding more symbols, more poems. One drawing stopped her cold. A figure in a long coat, white hair spilling over its shoulders, standing in the clearing. Mara. Ellen's heart pounded. Lila had known Mara, had sought her out, despite Ellen's warnings. Why? What had the old woman told her? And why had Lila never mentioned it? A knock at the front door jolted Ellen from her thoughts. She closed the notebook, tucking it under her arm, and hurried downstairs. Sarah stood on the porch, her face pale, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She held a cardboard box, its edges worn and taped. I didn't know where else to go, Sarah said, her voice tight. I found something. About Lila. Ellen ushered her inside, the air between them heavy with unspoken grief. They sat at the kitchen table, the box between them like a third presence. Sarah's hands shook as she opened it, revealing a stack of Lila's old things. Letters, photos, another notebook. These were in my attic, Sarah said. I kept them after she was gone. I couldn't let them go, but I couldn't look at them either. Ellen reached for the notebook. Its cover different from the one upstairs, but unmistakably Lila's, with the same looping handwriting. She opened it and found a letter tucked inside, addressed to Sarah in Lila's scrawl. The date was October 11th, 2015, the day before she vanished. Ellen's stomach twisted as she read aloud. Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. Not gone like you think, just somewhere else. The forest isn't what it seems. It's alive, and it knows me. I've been talking to Mara, and she says there's a place where the world splits open, where you can see what's on the other side. I have to go. I have to know. Don't hate me. And don't follow me. Love, Lila. Sarah's eyes were wet, her voice barely a whisper. I never saw this. I never opened the box until today. Ellen, what does it mean? What was she doing? Ellen's mind raced. The letter confirmed what Mara had hinted at. Lila hadn't been taken. She'd chosen to go. But where? And why? The word thresholding burned in her thoughts, tying the letter to the notebook, to the clearing, to the jacket. She showed Sarah the notebook from Lila's room, pointing to the sketch of the clearing and the words scrawled beneath it. Sarah's breath caught. I've seen that place, she said. In her drawings. She used to sketch it all the time, said it felt like home. Home? Ellen's voice cracked. She never said that to me. Sarah looked away, guilt flickering across her face. She didn't tell me everything either. But she was different those last few weeks, obsessed. She'd talk about the forest like it was a person, like it was calling her. I thought she was just being poetic. Ellen's gaze fell to the letter, to Lila's words, don't follow me. But she couldn't obey. Not now. Not when the forest had given back the jacket, when Mara's warnings and Lila's poems were pulling her towards something she didn't yet understand. We need to go back, she said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her chest. To the clearing. Together. Sarah nodded, though her eyes were wide with unease. What about Mara? She knows something, doesn't she? Ellen thought of the old woman's sharp gaze, the way she'd melted into the forest. She does, but I don't know if she'll help us. She said to bring something of Lila's, something that holds her light. Sarah reached into the box and pulled out the silver star bracelet. This, she said. Lila wore it every day. She said it reminded her to keep looking up. Ellen took the bracelet, its metal cool against her skin. It felt heavy, not with weight but with meaning. She didn't know what the forest wanted, or what Mara meant by a threshold, but she knew one thing. Lila was out there, somewhere, and the bracelet was her way in. Sarah's car rattled along the narrow road to Blackthorn High, the heater blasting against the October chill. The silver star bracelet sat in Ellen's lap, its tiny charm catching the weak sunlight. They hadn't spoken much since leaving the house, the weight of Lila's letter and notebook pressing down on them. Sarah's hands were steady on the wheel, but her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror too often, as if expecting something, or someone, to follow. Ellen felt it too, a prickle of unease, like the forest was watching even from here. Sarah had insisted on digging into Lila's past before returning to the clearing. We need to know what she was mixed up in, she'd said, her voice firm but frayed. Not just Mara, other people. She wasn't alone in this. Ellen had agreed, though every moment away from the forest felt like a betrayal of Lila's plea, that faint whisper in her dreams. I'm still here. But Sarah was right. Lila's letter mentioned a threshold, a choice, and if others in Blackthorn knew about it, they might hold the key to finding her. At the high school, Sarah led Ellen to the library, where she'd arranged to meet two of Lila's old classmates, now adults, still tethered to Blackthorn by jobs or family. The library smelled of old books and dust, its fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. Jake Carter, a lanky mechanic with tired eyes, and Emily Ruiz, a nurse with a nervous smile, sat at a corner table. They'd been part of Lila's circle, though not as close as Sarah. Ellen hadn't seen them in years, and their faces, aged, weathered, reminded her how much time had stolen. Thanks for coming, Sarah said, setting Lila's notebook on the table. I know it's been a while, but the jacket, it's stirred things up. We need to know if Lila ever talked about the forest, or Mara, or anything strange. Jake shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tapping the table. Lila was always strange, he said, not unkindly. She'd go on about the woods, how they talked to her. I thought it was just her poet thing, you know. But she got intense, kept saying she was looking for something bigger than Blackthorn. Emily nodded, her eyes on the notebook. She showed me a drawing once, a circle of trees with a stone in the middle. Said it was a place where time didn't work right. I laughed it off, but she was serious. She mentioned Mara, too. Said the old lady knew things the rest of us didn't. Ellen's heart quickened. The clearing. The stone. She opened the notebook to the sketch of the threshold, and Emily's breath caught. That's it, she said. That's what she showed me. Did she say anything about a cult? Sarah asked, her voice low. Or people in town? Involved in something? Jake frowned, glancing at Emily. A cult? No. But there were stories. Old ones from my grandpa's time. Said some folks in Blackthorn used to meet in the woods, doing rituals or whatever. Called themselves the Keepers. Supposedly they believed the forest was a gate to somewhere else. But that's just talk. Nobody takes it seriously. Ellen's hands tightened around the notebook. Lila did it, she said. She wrote about a threshold. She went looking for it. Emily's face paled. There was something else, she said hesitantly. A few weeks before she disappeared, Lila asked me if I'd ever heard of the Shadow's Call. I thought it was a line from one of her poems, but she said it was real, like a voice she heard in the forest. She was scared, but excited too. Sarah exchanged a glance with Ellen. The Shadow's Call. The last line of Lila's poem. Found in the bramble bush. The shadow calls, and I follow where the light cannot go. Ellen felt a chill, as if the words were alive, reaching for her. After Jake and Emily left, Sarah pulled Ellen aside. I looked into the Keepers, she whispered. There's nothing concrete, but I found an old newspaper article in the library archives. In the 1970s, a group was caught performing rituals in the forest. No charges were filed, but the article mentioned a name. Thomas Monroe. Ellen froze. Tom? My Tom? Sarah nodded, her eyes apologetic. It could be a coincidence, but he grew up here, didn't he? He never talked about the forest, or Lila's obsession with it. Ellen's mind reeled. Tom had been distant after Lila's disappearance, his grief a wall she couldn't breach. He'd left 5 years later saying he couldn't stay in a town that reminded him of her. But had he known something? Had he kept it from her? He never said anything, Ellen murmured, but doubt gnawed at her. She thought of the fights they'd had, how he'd flinched when she mentioned Mara, how he'd refused to join the search parties in the forest. We need to find him, Sarah said. If he was involved. No, Ellen cut in, her voice sharp. Not yet. The forest is where the answers are. We go to the clearing first, with the bracelet. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but we're not going alone. I don't trust Mara, and I don't trust this town. That night, Ellen sat in Lila's room, the bracelet in her hand. She traced the star charm, remembering how Lila had loved it, how she'd said it was her guide. The notebook lay open beside her, its pages filled with symbols that seemed to shift in the dim light. Ellen felt the forest's pull again, stronger now, like a tide dragging her under. She didn't know what the threshold was, or what Lila had found there, but she knew one thing. The answers were waiting, and she was running out of time. The forest was darker than Ellen remembered, the trees denser, their branches weaving a cage that blocked out the morning sun. She and Sarah walked single file, the path to the clearing barely visible under a carpet of fallen leaves. Ellen clutched the silver star bracelet, its weight grounding her against the disorienting hum that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Sarah carried a flashlight, though its beam did little to pierce the gloom. Neither spoke. The forest demanded silence, and they obeyed. They'd agreed to come at dawn, hoping the light would make the clearing less foreboding. but the forest seemed to defy time. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of pine and something metallic, like blood or rust. Ellen's heart pounded, each step pulling her closer to the memory of Lila's voice in her dreams. Sarah's face was set, her jaw tight, but her eyes darted to every shadow, every rustle. She'd brought one of Lila's notebooks, the one with the threshold sketch, as if its pages could guide them. The clearing appeared suddenly, as if the forest had parted to reveal it. The flat stone sat at its center, its surface gleaming faintly, like moonlight trapped in quartz. The trees around it stood like sentinels, their trunks etched with those same spiraling symbols Ellen had seen before. They pulsed, not with light but with something deeper, a vibration that thrummed in her bones. Sarah stopped short, her flashlight trembling in her hand. "This is it," she whispered. "Lila's place." Ellen stepped forward, the bracelet warm in her palm. The air in the clearing felt different, thinner, as if reality itself were stretched taut. She knelt by the stone, her fingers brushing its surface. It was warm, like the oak she'd touched days ago, and it sent a jolt through her, sharp and electric. "Lila," she murmured, not knowing why she spoke her daughter's name aloud. The hum grew louder, a chorus of voices just beyond hearing, and the scent of pine and rain flooded her senses. Sarah opened the notebook, her hands shaking as she traced the sketch of the clearing. "She wrote about this," she said. "About a door in the earth. She thought it was a way through. To somewhere else." Ellen's eyes stung with tears. "Mara called it a threshold," she said. "She said Lila crossed it. But how? And why now? Why the jacket?" Before Sarah could answer, a shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. Ellen's heart leapt, but it was only Mara, stepping from the trees as if she'd been waiting. Her coat was dusted with leaves, her eyes sharp and unyielding. "You brought it," she said, her gaze on the bracelet. "Good. The forest knows her light." "Enough riddles," Ellen snapped, standing. "What is this place? What happened to my daughter?" Mara's lips thinned. "This is the threshold, Ellen Monroe. A place where the world frays, where the living and the lost can meet. Lila found it." Sarah stepped forward, her voice fierce. "If she's still here, how do we get her back?" Mara's eyes flicked to the stone. "You don't get her back. You ask the forest to release her. But it always wants something in return. Something equal to what it took." Ellen's stomach twisted. "The bracelet?" Mara shook her head. "The bracelet is a key, not a price. The forest will ask for more, something of you or of her." She gestured to Sarah, who flinched. "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mara didn't answer. Instead, she knelt by the stone and traced a symbol on its surface, her fingers moving with practiced ease. The hum in the clearing intensified, and the air seemed to shimmer, like heat rising from pavement. Ellen's vision blurred, and for a moment she saw Lila, her daughter, standing by the stone, her red jacket vivid against the gray light. She was smiling, but her eyes were wrong, too bright, like stars burning out. "Lila!" Ellen lunged forward, but the image vanished, leaving only the stone and Mara's steady gaze. "She's close," Mara said. "But you're not ready. The forest tests those who seek it. Give it the bracelet, and it may show you more." Ellen hesitated, the bracelet heavy in her hand. It was Lila's, a piece of her heart. But if it could bring her closer to her daughter, she'd give anything. She placed the bracelet on the stone, its silver glinting against the smooth surface. The hum became a roar, and the clearing seemed to pulse, the trees bending inward as if drawn to the stone. Sarah grabbed Ellen's arm, her nails digging in, but Ellen couldn't look away. The bracelet sank into the stone, not physically but as if absorbed, its light swallowed by the dark. And then, a voice. Lila's voice, clear and sharp. "Mom, don't let it take you." Ellen fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. The voice was gone as quickly as it came, but it was real, not a dream. She looked at Mara, who stood unmoving, her expression unreadable. "What was that?" Ellen demanded. "Where is she?" The threshold, Mara said. She's caught between. You've opened the door, but you haven't paid the price. Sarah's voice trembled. What price? What does it want? Mara's eyes darkened. You'll know when it asks. Ellen couldn't move, her knees pressed into the cold earth of the clearing, her hands hovering over the stone where the bracelet had vanished. Lila's voice echoed in her mind, sharp and desperate. Don't let it take you. Good. The words weren't just a warning, they were a tether, pulling Ellen deeper into the mystery of her daughter's disappearance. The forest hummed around her, its pulse syncing with her heartbeat as if it were alive and hungry. Sarah stood beside her, her face pale, the notebook clutched to her chest like a shield. Mara hadn't moved, her figure a dark silhouette against the trees. Her eyes held a weight Ellen couldn't decipher. Pity, perhaps, or something colder. You heard her, Mara said, her voice low, almost swallowed by the forest's hum. She's still here, but not in the way you think. The threshold isn't a door you walk through. It's a bargain. Ellen's voice cracked. A bargain? With what? The forest? You? Yeah. Mara's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. Not me. The forest has its own will, its own hunger. It took Lila because she offered herself, willingly or not. Now it's taken her life. She gestured to the stone, now dull and empty without the bracelet's glint. But it's not enough. It never is. Sarah stepped forward, her fear giving way to anger. Stop talking like that. If Lila's here, we can get her back. Tell us how. Mara's gaze shifted to Sarah, sharp and assessing. You're a brave girl, but bravery doesn't matter here. The forest doesn't care about your heart. It wants what you value most. Lila gave it her curiosity. Her light? What will you give? Ellen stood, her legs unsteady, but her resolve hardening. Anything, she said. I'll give anything to bring her back. Mara's eyes softened, just for a moment. Be careful what you promise, Ellen Monroe. The forest listens. The air in the clearing thickened, the hum deepening into a low, resonant thrum that vibrated in Ellen's chest. She felt it again, that pull, like a current dragging her toward the stone. She saw flashes of Lila in her mind, her daughter laughing, her pen scratching in her notebook, her eyes wide with wonder as she spoke of the forest's pulse. But there were other images now, darker ones. Lila standing in the clearing, her face pale, her hands reaching for something Ellen couldn't see. Sarah's voice broke the silence. What do we do now? The bracelet's gone. What's next? Mara knelt by the stone, her fingers tracing its edge. You wait. The forest will show you the way, but it won't be kind. It'll test you, both of you. It'll show you what you're afraid to see. Ellen's throat tightened. And if we pass, if we give it what it wants. Mara looked up, her eyes like twin voids. Then you might see her, but she won't be the girl you remember. Before Ellen could press further, a wind swept through the clearing, sharp and sudden, carrying the scent of pine and rain. The trees swayed, their branches creaking like whispered voices. Ellen's skin prickled, and she turned, half expecting to see Lila standing there. But there was only darkness, and the stone and Mara's unwavering gaze. Go home, Mara said. Rest. The forest will call you back when it's ready. Sarah grabbed Ellen's arm. We're not leaving until you tell us everything. What's the threshold? What's on the other side? Mara stood, brushing dirt from her coat. The other side is where the lost go. Not dead, not alive, but caught. Lila found it, and it claimed her. The threshold is the seam between worlds, where the forest's heart beats strongest. But you can't force your way through. It chooses who enters. Ellen's voice was barely a whisper. And the price? Mara's expression hardened. It's different for everyone, but it's always something you can't bear to lose. The walk back to the car was silent, the forest's hum fading but never fully gone. Ellen felt it in her bones, a rhythm that matched the ache in her heart. Sarah drove, her hands tight on the wheel, her eyes fixed on the road. We needed to find Tom, she said finally. If he was part of those keepers, he might know what the forest wants. Ellen nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. tangled in Lila's voice, in the stone's strange warmth. She didn't trust Mara, not fully, but the old woman's words had rooted themselves in her mind. A bargain. A price. She thought of Tom, of the years he'd spent pulling away, his silence a wall she'd never breached. Had he known about the threshold? Had he let Lila walk into it? Back at the house, Ellen sat in Lila's room, the notebook open before her. She traced the symbols, their shapes familiar now, like a language she was beginning to understand. Sarah sat on the bed, flipping through her own box of Lila's things. She pulled out a photo, Lila and Tom, standing by the forest's edge, Lila's red jacket bright against the trees. Tom's smile was strained, his hand on Lila's shoulder too tight. He knew something, Sarah said, her voice low. He had to. Ellen didn't answer. She closed the notebook and stood, her eyes on the window. Outside, the forest loomed, its shadows stretching toward the house. She felt it calling, not just to her but to something deeper, something that had been waiting for 10 years. Lila was out there, caught in a place Ellen couldn't yet see, but she would find her, no matter the cost. The clearing was a wound in the world, its air thick with the weight of something ancient and unyielding. Ellen stood frozen, the stone before her now dull, the notebook and photo gone, as if the forest had devoured them. Sarah's hand was still on her arm, her grip tight enough to bruise. The symbols on the trees pulsed faintly, their green glow fading but not gone, like embers in a dying fire. The hum was quieter now, but it lingered in Ellen's bones, a reminder that the forest was awake and watching. Lila was here, Ellen whispered, her voice raw. I saw her. She spoke to me. Sarah's eyes were wide, her flashlight trembling. I saw her too, but she wasn't right. She didn't look like Lila, not really. Ellen nodded, her throat tight. The Lila she'd seen was a shadow of her daughter, her features sharp and strange, her voice carrying an echo that didn't belong. Mara's words came back to her. Yeah, she won't be the girl you remember. But it was Lila, and that was enough to keep Ellen here, tethered to this place where the world felt thin. We need Mara, Sarah said, her voice firm despite her fear. She knows how this works. She can tell us what to do next. Ellen didn't argue. Mara was a puzzle, a keeper of secrets who spoke in half-truths, but she was their only guide. They left the clearing, the forest seeming to part for them, its path straighter than before, as if urging them on. Mara's cabin was at the edge of town, a ramshackle structure half swallowed by vines. The air around it smelled of herbs and smoke, and the windows glowed with a faint, amber light. Mara was waiting, her door open before they knocked. You gave it what it asked for, she said, her eyes on Ellen. The forest took her light. Now it wants yours. Ellen's heart stuttered. What does that mean? My life? Mara's gaze softened, but only slightly. Not your life, Ellen Monroe. Your truth. The thing you hold closest, the thing you hide even from yourself. The forest sees it, and it will take it to give her back. Sarah stepped forward, her voice sharp. And me? What does it want from me? Mara's eyes flicked to her, assessing. You carry guilt, girl. The forest smells it. You were her friend, but you let her go. You'll have to face that. Sarah flinched, and Ellen saw the truth in her eyes. Guilt for not stopping Lila, for not seeing the signs. Ellen felt it too, a mirror of her own failure as a mother. But there was no time for regret. Tell us how to get her back, Ellen said. You said it's a bargain. What do we do? Mara gestured to a table cluttered with candles, herbs, and stones etched with symbols. A ritual, she said. To open the threshold fully, but it's not simple. The forest will show you Lila, but it will also show you what you fear, and it will ask for your truth in return. Ellen's mind raced. What kind of ritual? Mara lit a candle, its flame casting shadows that danced like spirits. You'll stand in the clearing at the stone. You'll offer something of yourself, not an object, but a piece of your heart. A memory, a secret, something that defines you. The forest will take it, and if it's enough, it will let you see her. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. And if it's not enough? Mara's expression darkened. Then it keeps you instead. Ellen's stomach twisted, but she nodded. We'll do it, tonight. Mara shook her head. Not tonight. The forest chooses the time. You'll know when it calls. That night, Ellen and Sarah sat in Ellen's living room, the silence heavy between them. The forest's hum was faint now, but it hadn't left them. Ellen thought of Tom, of his confession about the keepers, his failure to protect Lila. She wanted to hate him, but all she felt was a hollow ache. Sarah was quiet, her eyes on the floor, wrestling with her own guilt. They were bound by Lila, by the need to find her, but the forest's price loomed like a shadow. At midnight, the hum returned, loud and insistent, vibrating through the house. Ellen stood, her heart pounding. It's time, she said. Sarah nodded, grabbing her coat, her face set with determination. They drove to the forest, the night thick with clouds that hid the stars. The clearing was waiting, the stone glowing faintly, the symbols on the trees pulsing once more. Mara was there, her coat blending with the shadows. She held a small bundle of herbs, their scent sharp and bitter. Stand by the stone, she said. Speak your truth. The forest will listen. Ellen stepped forward, her hands empty but her heart full. She thought of Lila, of the years lost, of the love she'd failed to show. I didn't listen, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't see how much she needed me. I let her go, and I'll never forgive myself. Sarah's turn came next, her voice trembling. I knew she was slipping away, she said. I saw her change, but I didn't stop her. I was afraid of losing her, so I said nothing. The stone flared, its light blinding. Ellen shielded her eyes, and when she looked again, Lila was there, real, solid, her red jacket vivid against the stone. But her eyes were wrong, glowing with that same unnatural light. Mom, she said, her voice a mix of pain and love. You can't stay. Ellen reached for her, but the forest roared and the world tilted, pulling her into darkness. Ellen woke on the cold earth of the clearing, her body aching as if she'd been running for hours. The stone loomed before her, its glow faded to a dull shimmer. Sarah was beside her, breathing shallowly, her face pale in the moonlight. Mara stood at the edge of the clearing, her eyes fixed on the trees, as if watching something Ellen couldn't see. The air was heavy, the scent of pine and rain so thick it felt like drowning. Lila, Ellen whispered, her voice hoarse. She could still see her daughter's face, those glowing eyes, the warning in her voice. You can't stay. It wasn't a dream. She'd felt Lila, the warmth of her presence, the weight of her absence. But the forest had pulled her back, denying her the chance to hold her daughter. Sarah stirred, her eyes fluttering open. What happened? She asked, her voice weak. I saw her. She was right there. Mara's voice cut through the silence. You opened the threshold, but you didn't pay the full price. The forest showed you what you wanted, but it's not done with you. Ellen struggled to her feet, anger flaring. We gave you our truth. We did what you said. Where is she? Mara's expression was unreadable. The forest doesn't bargain like you think. Truth is only the beginning. It wants something deeper, something that will break you. Sarah stood, her hands clenched. Then tell us what it wants. No more games. Mara's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. It wants your essence, the thing that makes you who you are. For you, Ellen, it's your hope. The belief that Lila can come back whole. For you, Sarah, it's your guilt, the weight you carry for letting her go. Give those up, and the forest might release her, but you'll lose yourselves in the process. Ellen's heart sank. Her hope was all she had left, the fire that had kept her alive through a decade of grief. To give it up was to surrender the possibility of Lila's return, to accept a world without her. She looked at Sarah, whose face was a mirror of her own turmoil. Sarah's guilt was her shadow, The reason she'd stayed in Blackthorn, teaching at the high school where Lila's absence lingered like a ghost. "I can't," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I can't let go of that. It's all I have of her." Ellen reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. "We don't have a choice," she said. "If it's the only way to get her back, we have to try." Mara nodded, her hands moving to light a circle of candles around the stone. Their flames flickered, casting shadows that seemed to writhe and twist. "Stand together," she said. "Speak to the forest, not to me. Offer what it asks, and it may answer." Ellen stepped forward, her heart pounding. The stone was cold now, its surface rough under her fingers. She closed her eyes, picturing Lila, not the glowing-eyed figure from the vision, but the girl she'd raised, the girl who'd laughed and dreamed and written poems that broke her heart. "I give you my hope," she said, her voice trembling. "The hope that she'll come back to me. Take it, but give her back." Sarah's voice followed, soft and broken. "I give you my guilt, the weight of not saving her. Take it and let her go." The clearing shuddered, the ground trembling beneath their feet. The candles flared, their flames stretching impossibly high, and the symbols on the trees blazed with green light. Ellen's vision blurred, and she saw Lila again, standing by the stone, her red jacket tattered but real. Her eyes were still wrong, but there was something else in them now: fear, love, recognition. "Mom," Lila said, her voice clearer, closer. "You don't know what you're giving up." Ellen reached for her, tears streaming down her face. "I know," she said, "but I can't lose you again." The forest roared, a sound that wasn't sound but pressure, a wave that pressed against Ellen's chest. She felt something tear inside her, not pain but loss, as if a piece of her soul had been ripped away. Sarah gasped beside her, her hand clutching Ellen's, and Ellen knew she felt it too. Their offerings taken, their essences diminished. Lila stepped closer, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, her voice thick with sorrow. "The forest doesn't give back what it takes." Before Ellen could respond, the stone flared again, and Lila's form dissolved, leaving only the scent of pine and rain. The candles went out, and the clearing fell silent, the hum gone, the symbols dark. Mara was still there, her eyes heavy with something like regret. "You paid the price," she said, "but the forest decides what it gives." Ellen fell to her knees, her hands digging into the earth. "Where is she?" she screamed. "You said we'd get her back." Mara knelt beside her, her voice soft. "She's closer now, but the threshold isn't a door you can force open. You've given it what it asked. Now, you wait." Sarah's voice was a whisper. "Wait for what?" Mara looked to the trees, their branches still in the windless night. "For the forest to choose." The clearing was silent, the stone at its center cold and dull under the weight of the night. Ellen knelt in the dirt, her hands still trembling from the ritual, from the sight of Lila. So close, yet untouchable. The forest's hum had vanished, leaving a void that echoed the emptiness inside her. She'd given her hope, the fire that had sustained her for a decade, and Sarah had given her guilt, the shadow that defined her. Yet Lila was still gone, her presence a fleeting vision swallowed by the threshold. Mara stood at the edge of the clearing, her figure barely distinguishable from the trees, her eyes fixed on the darkness, as if it held answers she wouldn't share. Ellen's voice was raw, barely a whisper. "You said we'd get her back. You said the forest would give her up." Mara's gaze shifted to her, heavy with something like sorrow. "The forest keeps its promises, Lila Monroe, but not in the way you expect. You opened the threshold. You saw her. That's more than most get." Sarah stepped forward, her face pale but fierce. "That's not enough. We gave it everything. Our truth, our hope, our guilt. Where is she?" Mara's lips thinned. "She's where she chose to be. The threshold isn't just a door. It's a choice. Lila crossed it, knowing the cost. You can't undo what she decided." Ellen's heart cracked open, the words cutting deeper than any blade. "She was 16, she said, her voice breaking. She didn't know what she was choosing. She was my daughter. Mara's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. She was more than that. She felt the forest's pulse, heard its call. She wanted to know what lay beyond, and she found it. The jacket, the visions, they're her way of reaching back, of telling you she's still there. Ellen shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't want visions. I want her here with me. Sarah's hand found Ellen's, her grip steady despite the tremor in her voice. There has to be more we can do. You said the forest chooses. How do we make it choose her? Mara gestured to the stone, its surface now etched with faint, spiraling symbols that hadn't been there before. You've given what it asked. Now you listen. The forest will speak, but only if you're ready to hear. Ellen wiped her eyes, forcing herself to stand. The air in the clearing was heavy, the scent of pine and rain still lingering, a reminder of Lila's presence. She approached the stone, her fingers tracing the new symbols. They were warm, pulsing faintly under her touch, and for a moment she felt Lila, not as a vision, but as a warmth in her chest, a spark that hadn't been there since the ritual took her hope. Lila, she whispered, closing her eyes. If you're there, show me. The clearing seemed to hold its breath, the trees still, the night silent. Then, a sound, not the hum, but a soft, melodic note, like a bell ringing underwater. Ellen's vision blurred, and she saw her daughter again, standing not by the stone but in a place that wasn't the forest, wasn't anywhere. The air around Lila shimmered, a tapestry of light and shadow, and her eyes were no longer glowing but soft, green as the pines, filled with love and sorrow. Mom, Lila said, her voice clear now, no longer distorted. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave you. Ellen reached out, her hand passing through the air where Lila stood. Why did you go? Why didn't you tell me? Lila's smile was sad, fleeting. I wanted to know. The forest showed me things, worlds, truths, things I couldn't unsee. I thought I could come back, but it's not that simple. Sarah stepped beside Ellen, her voice trembling. Lila, we're here. We'll do whatever it takes. Just tell us how to bring you home. Lila's gaze shifted to Sarah, a flicker of the old warmth in her eyes. You can't. I'm not lost, not the way you think. The threshold is my home now. But I needed you to know I'm okay. Ellen's knees buckled and she sank to the ground, her hands clutching the stone. I can't lose you again, she said, her voice a sob. I gave everything. Lila knelt, her form flickering but solid enough to feel real. You didn't lose me. I'm still here in the light beyond. You gave your hope, but you don't need it anymore. You have me, always. The words were a balm and a wound, healing and breaking Ellen's heart. She wanted to scream, to demand more, but Lila's presence was a gift, fragile and fleeting. She felt Sarah's hand on her shoulder, steadying her, and she knew Sarah felt it too. The truth that Lila was gone, but not gone, caught in a place they couldn't follow. The vision faded, and the clearing was silent again. Mara stepped forward, her voice soft. The forest gave you what it could. She's free, in her way. You set her free. Ellen looked at the stone, its symbols now still, their warmth gone. She felt empty but not hollow, a quiet acceptance settling where her hope had been. Sarah's face was wet with tears, but she nodded, her guilt replaced by a fragile peace. They left the clearing, the forest parting for them one last time. The town of Blackthorn lay quiet under the dawn, its secrets buried once more. Ellen carried Lila's presence in her heart, a light that didn't fade. She didn't know if the threshold was real, if the forest was alive, or if her mind had woven a story to ease her grief. But she knew Lila was out there, in the light beyond, and that was enough. Back at the house, Ellen placed a new photo on the mantel. Lila's red jacket, a snapshot from the police evidence file. It wasn't closure, not fully, but it was a promise. Sarah stayed, and they sat together, sharing stories of Lila, her laughter, her poems, her light. The forest was silent now, its hum gone, but Ellen felt it still, a pulse that connected her to her daughter, wherever she was. Have you ever felt a pull you couldn't explain, a place that seemed to know you? A moment when the ordinary frayed, revealing something more? Share your story, your mystery, in the comments below. Let's weave a tapestry of the unseen, where the lost are never truly gone, and the light beyond shines for us all.